Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. Over the last couple days, I've been looking at a number of different charts, and when I go back and look at every single one of our prior cycles, I've noticed something that's played out for the altcoins every single time. We always know that Bitcoin's the driver of value. We always wait for Bitcoin to do its thing, and eventually the altcoins pick up pace and outperform. I have some very important charts to share with you guys that I'm confident are going to perfectly explain why we're so close to our first major alt season and why 2025 is destined to be such a profitable year for investors. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Without further ado, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Now, as we're jumping into the crypto markets, I wanted to go through and start with the Bitcoin dominance, because when we're talking about what is the most important charts to understand in the crypto markets, it really doesn't get any more important than talking about the relationship of Bitcoin dominance and the altcoins. We know that if we're ever going to see a true altcoin season, it rides around this market finally topping in the Bitcoin dominance. Now, the reason I wanted to share with you guys this chart is because I've had so many people constantly asking me, what are my thoughts around what's taking place? What is taking place around the Bitcoin dominance? Is this cycle any different? And all we can look at is how the prior cycles have behaved, and we have to understand that every cycle is always going to bring a new set of challenges. It's going to be unique in its own way. But at the end of the day, one thing I've noticed is that the cycles end up being very much similar, although there are ending up to be some, minor differences along the way. The big thing we know is the time frames stay the same, and so if the time frames are staying the same, we can have a little bit of an idea and a reference point as far as what is about to take place throughout the rest of the year. We know that when it comes to Bitcoin dominance bottomed here at pretty much September of 2022, the ending of that year. So for the last over 3 years, we've just been steadily uptrending, as Bitcoin dominance and the price of Bitcoin has gone into a new all-time high. Bitcoin dominance has creeped all the way back up near those same levels that we were right before our alt season started in the last bull market. So when we're looking at Bitcoin dominance today, there's nothing that has been bearish up to this point, because not only did we break out of our resistance here, our horizontal resistance at about 50%, but over the course of the last 2 years, we've maintained higher highs and higher lows the entire way up this trend. So the Bitcoin dominance has really just maintained strength. There's nothing up to this point that has given us any sort of indication that maybe we are at a shifting point, up until just recently when we saw this big shakeout in the altcoins. And when we saw that big shakeout in the altcoins, we noticed that the Bitcoin dominance actually made this big jump, right? We went from 54% all the way up to 64%, gaining 10% in just that one swing. And what it reminded me a lot of is kind of what we saw in that last bull market right before we ended up seeing that final bull trap in the Bitcoin dominance. And I think that this can go one of two ways. Now, the big thing that we need to be aware of is the altcoin price. Keep in mind that this is the total market cap excluding Bitcoin and ETH. So this is just all of the altcoins in the market outside of those two. When we're looking at this, we've already retested that prior all-time high. And that was what we just recently were rallying up to do, as Bitcoin made its first big run into new all-time highs. The altcoins were just retesting those prior all-time highs. And that was right where we ended up getting this short-term top. And then we pulled back about 30 to 40% inside of that move. So we're having this big capitulation, about 35% that we saw in this correction. And as we've seen that correction, we've seen the Bitcoin dominance making this big push up. But the thing that interests me around this push in the Bitcoin dominance is if we're zooming in here, notice how I'm on a weekly time frame, and we did get our weekly close. So when we're looking at this, we got this big upper wick, and we were unable to actually hold that breakout. So a couple things can happen. Right now, if the market bounces and we reclaim that level, we can easily just make another higher high and push, further up like we have up to this point. However, because we did get that weekly close, just over the last couple days, because we got that weekly close and the candle body did reject below this resistance, there is at least a potential where maybe this doesn't reclaim this resistance, we reject here again, and then we start actually, maybe looking at a potential top and a shifting point in the altcoins. I don't like to call tops because at the end of the day, calling tops and calling bottoms generally isn't going to work out for the most part. But when we're talking about the long term of the altcoins, we know that with the altcoins sitting at these prior all-time highs, it's pretty much right when the altcoins make their first new all-time high that we see the Bitcoin dominance rotate. And we can come back down to this first cycle and see a lot of those same parallels, right? Remember how we were sitting and we made this long-term bottom formation over the course of like 2 years, And Bitcoin made this big push into a new all-time high. And when we're looking at this Bitcoin dominance bottomed right here. August, basically the very first week of September. So that would have been right here for the altcoins. As the altcoins kind of broke out of their range low of resistance and flipped it as new support here, they just kind of went sideways and didn't do anything, right? As Bitcoin was making a new all-time high. We can pull up 3 different charts right here. Bitcoin dominance bottomed right here. So Bitcoin had just broken out. We flipped that $10,000 level as new support. And then Bitcoin teleported straight into new all-time highs. And the Bitcoin dominance was breaking out, right? Bitcoin dominance went from 57% all the way up to 73%, a big 20% move. And if you notice here, the altcoins, were still pretty much just lagging. They had finally started to at least, uptrend again. But when we're talking about this big of a move for Bitcoin going into price discovery, it took a little bit of time before the altcoins were finally ready to do that. And we saw one final capitulation or a bull trap take place in the Bitcoin dominance as that was kind of, taking shape. So as we're zooming out here, we're looking at the altcoin total market cap today, just retesting those prior all-time highs. We can see that we did technically get this rejection on a weekly. Whether we get confirmation of that and this follows through to the downside, we're going to have to wait and see through the rest of this week. But let's assume that maybe this ends up behaving in a similar way that the last rejection did, where it was pretty much right here. The Bitcoin made its big, move into price discovery and the Bitcoin dominance topped. And it was, altcoins went vertical straight into new all-time highs throughout that move. So as we've already maintained higher highs, altcoins have done that the entire time. Every single time we make a new high, we end up, correcting, retesting that as new support. Every single time, we've done that 3 different times. So with us now just being right up here at the range highs, moments away from finally entering price discovery, even if we came back down and retested this level, I find it likely that these are all about to make another big push into price discovery. And so when we're looking at Bitcoin, Bitcoin's already had that big move into, new all-time highs. We've been watching Bitcoin. It's outperformed everything so far. But it did the same thing in the last bull market, right? When we're talking about Bitcoin making that first big push, it did the same thing, and we saw a lot of outperformance in the short term around the Bitcoin dominance. But when we're looking at it today, seeing something relatively similar, even if we ended up getting one more peak above here, it could be kind of that little 5-wave rise before that top in a similar way that we saw it right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that was kind of your final bull trap. Just don't be surprised if that's the case, considering, altcoins, aren't actually performing that bad. If we're looking at this, altcoins were at an even worse point in the last cycle in their early portion. Altcoins have already been maintaining higher highs and higher lows throughout the entirety. Even though Bitcoin dominance has been climbing with it, the price of the altcoins is still really high in retrospect. And so when I'm looking at Bitcoin, most likely getting ready for that next big push, probably going to push us up to 150,000 on the next breakout. I find it likely that this next push for the altcoins is going to basically be that same kind of shifting point that we were experiencing in the last bull market. The question just really comes down to, when is this actually going to be topping at? Are we going to get one more final kind of peak here before that's finished, or is that going to be kind of us rejecting at this weekly close right here? I don't know yet. The weekly did close below resistance, so we got the whole week to determine. The big thing I want you guys to just be aware of is that with the altcoins sitting all the way back up here at these prior all-time highs, and with us having that big shakeout in the altcoins, Ethereum dropped, I do find it likely that the second that we finally were able to get a confirmation close, a rejection below our resistance, that's when we're going to see that shift. And it really is lining up a lot with how these prior cycles have played out, where that final sort of bull trap capitulation takes place in the Bitcoin dominance, and that's right as Bitcoin's first starting to enter price discovery. So when I look at the altcoins right below those prior all-time highs, we've just pretty much one higher high away from making price discovery for the first time. If altcoins are in price discovery, it means that they're going to be outperforming their Bitcoin ratios, because altcoins never outperform Bitcoin until the point in which really, Bitcoin's already so far ahead of them in a price discovery that we have no choice but for people to play catch up with the alts. And then we see them, reverse ultimately into new all-time highs. So as I'm looking at this, I see a lot of the same similarities. I think that we're moments away from that big alt season. And it really comes down to how our current market consolidates on the Bitcoin dominance. We got the weekly close below. We need to see how this materializes, whether we can confirm the rejection and go lower, or whether we're going to get another break above. I'll keep you guys updated. This is the video. Wanted to make sure you guys know exactly what I'm thinking, Wanted to comment on some of your guys' questions and concerns that you've been, reaching out to me with. At the end of the day, I really don't think that this is any different, and the time frames are pretty much right on par with those prior cycles. It always looks the worst right at the last possible moment for the altcoins to start reversing. It did the same thing in the last bull market as Bitcoin doubled in price into new all-time highs. Altcoins were still at rock bottom valuations. This is more of the same type of stuff. So don't be too worried about it. Focus on the long term. We got a lot of good things coming, and I'm confident that this market's only just getting started through this year. So guys, if you found value, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. If you want to see anything I'm investing in long term, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my private group on my website. With that being said, I love you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.